Welcome to the Savage Executive Podcast. My name is Steve Smith, and I serve as an executive, but also a fractional COO and CFO for faith-driven leaders. And whether you're leading a company, a church, a nonprofit, or some combination of all three, you carry real weight. This podcast exists to help you carry it well. This is wisdom for the weight you carry. Let's get into it. I want to start with a question. It makes a lot of faith-driven leaders uncomfortable. If God entrusted you with a skill, an expertise, a calling, is it honoring to Him to undercharge for it? Most of us have been taught explicitly or implicitly that money is a suspect motive, that wanting to be paid well for our work is somehow at odds with ministry, with calling, with generosity. So we underprice. We discount reflexively. We feel guilty asking for full value. We frame financial hesitation as humility, and we call it virtue. But here is what undercharging actually produces over time: an unsustainable organization, a leader running on empty, reduced capacity to hire well, serve well, give well, and to last, a mission that slowly suffocates under financial pressure that could have been avoided. When your model cannot sustain itself, the mission contracts, and a contracted mission serves fewer people. It does less good, and it honors the one who called you to it less effectively than a funded, sustainable one. Undercharging is not a virtue. It is a stewardship failure. And today, we are going to fix it. Not by abandoning the values that make you who you are, but by rebuilding your pricing framework on the one value that should be driving everything: faithful stewardship of what God has entrusted to you. So here are 5 principles for pricing with integrity. Every one of these applies whether you are running a consulting firm, a nonprofit, a ministry, a church, or a Christian school. So let's get into it. 5 principles for pricing with integrity. Principle number 1, your price is a statement of value, not just an exchange. When you set a price, you are not simply naming a number. You are communicating something about what you believe that your work is worth. And more importantly, what kind of outcomes you produce for the people you serve. Low prices communicate low value, regardless of what you believe internally about the quality of your work. High prices communicate serious investment. And serious investment attracts serious clients, serious congregants, serious partners. This matters for ministry organizations as much as it does for business. A Christian school that prices tuition at 60% of the actual cost of educating a student communicates that the education is worth 60% of what it costs. Price shapes perception, and perception shapes engagement and outcomes. So the principle is this: your price is a positioning statement. Make sure it positions you where you actually belong. If your pricing sends the message that your work is average, your clients, families, and congregants will treat it as average, even when it is exceptional. Principle number 2, stewardship requires sustainability. The stewardship argument for fair pricing is simple and airtight. God entrusted you with a mission. That mission requires resources. If your pricing model does not generate enough margin to sustain the mission over the long term, the mission eventually dies. And a dead mission serves no one. I have watched faith-driven leaders run their organizations into the ground on the altar of accessibility. They kept prices low out of genuine compassion, and then they had to close their doors, lay off their team, or gut their programs because the model was not sustainable. Their compassion was real. Their stewardship was poor. And the people they were trying to serve were ultimately harmed more by the organization's collapse than they would have been by a higher price point. Sustainability is not about a concession to capitalism. It is a prerequisite for impact. You cannot serve from empty. You cannot give from zero. You cannot build from debt. The leaders who have the most long-term impact are the ones who figured out how to generate enough margin to keep doing the work consistently over decades. That requires sustainable pricing. A pricing model that cannot sustain your mission is not humble. It is irresponsible. Sustainable margins are an act of faithfulness, not a compromise of it. Principle number 3, market rate is not the ceiling. It's oftentimes the floor. Too many leaders use market rate as their pricing target when they should be using it as their baseline. Market rate tells you what the market tolerates. It does not tell you what you are worth. If you are delivering exceptional results, if your clients' businesses grow, if your congregation transforms, if your students outperform their peers, if the financial positions of those you serve strengthen materially, you are not a market rate provider. You are a premium value provider. Premium pricing requires premium delivery. You have to earn the right to charge more, and you earn it by producing outcomes that are measurably above what a market rate provider produces. But if you're doing that work and not capturing the value, if you're producing exceptional outcomes at average rates, you are subsidizing the people that you serve with your own margin. That's not generosity, that's a pricing problem, and it'll eventually break your organization. So know your market rate. Then honestly assess whether you are producing above, at, or below market value. Price accordingly. Not above your delivery, but not below it either. The goal is alignment between value created and value captured. Principle number 4, discounts cost more than you think. Most leaders dramatically underestimate the real cost of a discount. A 20% discount on a $10,000 engagement is $2,000. But it is not just $2,000 of lost revenue, it is $2,000 of lost margin, which may represent 60 or 70% of your profit on that engagement. A single reflexive discount can eliminate the entire profitability of a project and turn a good piece of work into a loss leader. And discounts compound behaviorally. When you discount once, you train your people to expect discounts. When you discount consistently, you train yourself to price low in anticipation of discounting, which means your nominal rates become increasingly disconnected from what you actually receive. The discount habit is one of the most expensive habits a leader can develop and is almost always rooted in anxiety rather than strategy. I'm not saying never discount. Strategic discounts, like for volume commitments, for long-term relationships, for specific mission-aligned circumstances where you have made a deliberate choice to subsidize, they all have their place. What I am saying is this: every discount should be deliberate, calculated, and clearly justified internally. It's not reflexive. It's not apologetic. It's not a habit born of the discomfort of asking for full value. Principle 5, value-based pricing changes everything. The most powerful pricing shift that you can make is moving from cost plus or hourly pricing to value-based pricing. Cost plus asks, what did it cost me to produce this? Hourly asks, how long did it take me? Value-based asks, what is the outcome worth to the person receiving it? If your financial consulting saves a client $300,000 and you charge $10,000 for the engagement, you delivered 30 times your fee in value. That's not a fair exchange for either party. The client benefits disproportionately, and you have no sustainable incentive to produce efficiently or invest in deepening your expertise. Value-based pricing aligns your incentives with your client's outcomes. It rewards your expertise rather than your hours. And it creates the margin necessary to do the kind of deep, high-quality work that produces exceptional outcomes in the first place. It is the pricing model that best reflects faithful stewardship of the gifts and expertise that God has entrusted to you. Let me tell you about a school that I help lead. This is our Christian school in Maryland. And it taught me more about pricing as stewardship than any consulting engagement that I've ever done. 10 years ago, we were the lowest priced private Christian school in our area by a pretty large margin, not by just a few $100s. It was by a lot. And on the surface, that felt like the right thing to do. We were a ministry. We wanted to be accessible. We wanted families to be able to say yes without it crushing their budget. Our pricing reflected those values, or at least that is the story that we told ourselves. Here's what our pricing actually produced. Our teachers were underpaid relative to the market, so we lost good ones to other schools that paid better, which means we had lower quality teachers in our school. Our facilities were stretched. Deferred maintenance would begin to accumulate. Capital projects waited indefinitely. Our budget had no room for the kinds of investments that would have served our students better. Updated technology, additional support staff, expanded programming. And this part took me the longest to see. We had no real margin to extend tuition assistance to the families who genuinely needed it. We were quietly serving everyone at a level just below what each family deserved because we had built a model that could not fully fund anyone. The lowest price in the region was not a stewardship win, it was a stewardship failure dressed up as compassion. So we made a decision. We were going to price the school for what the education was actually worth. And we were going to do it in a way that made the school more sustainable and more accessible at the same time. We had to do this incrementally over the next 10 years. But over those years, our tuition has roughly tripled. I want you to feel the weight of that number before I tell you what it produced. Tripling tuition over a decade sounds on the surface like a story about pricing people out. Sounds like a story about a school that abandoned its mission. That is not what happened. Here is what actually happened. Our tuition today is still one of the most affordable Christian school options in our region. It's not the lowest by design, but well below the regional ceiling and competitive with schools offering significantly less. We built the model so that even at 3 times our original rate, we are still meeting families where they are. But here's the part that matters most. We now have real tuition assistance capacity, real scholarships, real flexibility for the families who genuinely cannot afford full tuition. The school that priced itself at the rock bottom of the market 10 years ago had nothing meaningful to offer the family in crisis. The school that priced itself appropriately today can say yes to that family structurally, consistently and without breaking the model. We have margin to extend grace because we built the model to generate margin. And here's the number that should stop you. Our enrollment tripled over the same decade, from 300 students to 900. The school that priced itself at the bottom of the market served 300 students. The school that priced itself for mission serves 900. Same school, same community, different stewardship discipline. That is what sustainable, value-based pricing produces in a ministry context. It does not price people out. It funds the mission well enough to extend access in ways that pure low pricing never could. Stewardship pricing is not the enemy of accessibility. It is the foundation to it. Now, I want to address one more objection before we move on. The one I hear most often from ministry leaders specifically, it goes like this. Our people can't afford to pay more. We serve a lower income community. Charging more would put us out of reach of the people we're called to serve. That objection deserves a real answer. And here it is. Sustainability-based pricing and accessibility are not mutually exclusive. They require structural thinking. If your mission includes serving people who genuinely cannot afford full price, then your model needs to include scholarship capacity, tiered pricing, donor-subsidized seats, or grant funding, all of which require the organization to have margin to work with. The organization that has underpriced everything has no margin to subsidize anything. The organization that has priced appropriately can choose how and where to extend grace. Pricing fairly does not mean pricing exclusively. It means building a model that sustains the mission and then designing intentional mechanisms for extending access to those who need support. That is stewardship thinking applied to both revenue and mission. Both matter. Both deserve design. One quick note for pastors and church leaders that are listening. If you are wrestling with the other side of this equation, not pricing, but how to grow giving in a way that is biblical and sustainable, I've put together a companion guide for exactly that work. I was able to share a lot of these principles at a conference in Virginia this past year. And if you email me directly at steve@savageexecutive.com, that's steve@savageexecutive.com, put the word giving in the subject line, and I will send you the guide. I'll send it to you at no charge. It's the companion piece to what we have just unpacked, but for churches. Pricing fairly funds your fee-based programs, but healthy generosity development funds the rest of the mission. Here is the Savage takeaway for today. What you charge reflects what you believe you're worth and what you believe God can do through what He's entrusted to you. What we just unpacked is the discipline of stewardship. It's one of the 5 disciplines inside of the Savage Advantage playbook. You don't own what you lead. You answer for it. Stewardship is not just about spending carefully. It is about capturing fair value for what God has entrusted to you and using that value to fund the mission that He has called you to. Price accordingly. The laborer is worthy of his hire, the Bible says in Luke chapter 10, verse 7. Jesus said it. Not a business consultant, not a pricing strategist. Jesus, in the context of sending workers out to advance the kingdom. He established this principle that workers deserve fair compensation for their labor. There is no virtue in chronic undercharging. There is no spiritual merit in building an unsustainable model. The parable of the talents reinforces this. The servant who buried the talent was not celebrated for his caution. He was rebuked for his failure to multiply what he had been given. God expects return on investment. Sustainable, value-based pricing is one of the mechanisms by which the return is generated and by which the mission that God has entrusted you remains funded and effective. Build a model that lasts. Charge what your work is worth. Identify one service, program, tuition tier, registration fee, or offering that you know is underpriced. Calculate what value-based pricing would look like. Not what the market bears, but what the outcome is actually worth to the person receiving it. Then identify one step to close the gap. Not necessarily all the way to full value in one move, but directionally correct. If you serve a population that genuinely cannot afford full price, also design the subsidy mechanism that makes access possible without undermining the model. And here's the diagnostic question from the Savage Advantage playbook for this discipline. What would change about your leadership if you led as though everything you have was on loan? Take that question seriously this week. Write your answer down. It will tell you more about the health of your organization than most assessments ever will. The Savage Advantage playbook is available. It's free at savageexecutive.com. 5 disciplines, real diagnostics, and a 30-day path to put the framework to work. It is the foundation of everything that I teach. Download your copy at savageexecutive.com. And if this episode sharpened your thinking, share it with one leader who needs it this week. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Savage Executive on Instagram. Next week, fear and faith. Because the thing standing between you and your next level is probably not a strategy problem. This is the Savage Executive. I'm Steve Smith. Lead with excellence, steward with faithfulness, and carry the weight with grace.